Welcome, teacher friend. I'm Lori.
And I'm Melissa.
We are two literacy educators in Baltimore. We want the best for all kids, and we know you do too.
Our district recently adopted a new literacy curriculum, which meant a lot of change for everyone. Lori and I can't wait to keep learning about literacy with you today.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Literacy Podcast with Melissa and Lori. We are so excited for our guest today because we get to hear from a real practitioner in the field who is doing incredible work with staff and students in a fabulous school in Colorado. So, Melissa.
Yeah, I love talking to people who are actually doing the work.
Yes.
It's so fun to talk to our researcher friends and everybody, but it's even better to talk to people who are really doing the work in the field and hearing what's actually happening out there.
Yes. So we have the wonderful Rachel Arnold. She's a literacy interventionist at Clayton Elementary School in Englewood, Colorado. Rachel, welcome.
Thank you. It's so great to be
Rachel.
here. I'm honored. Thank you. Hi, ladies.
Well, would you mind kicking us off by just sharing a little bit about yourself and also what you do? I know I shared that you're a literacy interventionist at Clayton, but a little bit about yourself, what you do at Clayton, because I know it's more than just being a literacy interventionist. You're also teaching this year because of the pandemic and filling lots of shoes, right?
Well, yes. And so I've been in education since 1997, so a long time, but as a classroom teacher, but mostly as an interventionist. And so this year, yes, I think everybody's had to sort of be flexible and take on a variety of roles. And we've, because of cohorting, and so I've been teaching and having my small groups, but this year I'm taking on the role of the special education practitioner, where we have someone that I work in collaboration with as the caseworker. And so again, to keep everybody safe, I've taken on that role, and I've been so fortunate to be able to implement and to have a leadership role with Wit and Wisdom and Geodes this year. So that was really delightful, and I'm so fortunate. It speaks to my passion about high quality literacy instruction for every student, and so those materials and what we've been doing just goes along with that. So I'm so happy to do that.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And we're so happy that you're here so that everybody can hear about what you do day in, day out with your students and with your staff at your school. So I'm curious, can you just give us a little background on Clayton? What are the grade levels there? And also like big school, small school, rural school, urban school. I'm assuming it's not urban because you're in Colorado. So
well, actually, that is not true.
Is that it? Oh, am I? Denver's urban, right? Denver's urban.
It is. And so, yes, I know we had this idea of, being out in the plains, but we're in Denver. And so it's a smaller district. It's a very sweet, small district in Englewood, which is sort of in the middle of Denver. And so we are K-6. So
okay.
We do have the sixth graders with us. And again, it's a small school, small district. And so it gives us an opportunity to know everybody. So it's really nice to be in such a small setting, but it is an urban setting, Title I school.
Well, shame on me for not knowing that Englewood is urban.
Now you know.
I will be the first to say geography is not my strong point. And my sister even lives in Colorado, so I should really know a little bit more than I do.
That's okay. No, it's like Colorado.
Sorry,
it's the cowboy thing. No, that's right. The cowboy skiers.
Oh. So go ahead.
Yeah, Rachel, I'm just wondering, we've talked to several people about, using Wit and Wisdom in Tier 1 regular instruction. I'm so interested to hear your take on what you're doing as an interventionist and how, I don't know, what materials are you using and what does it look like? What did you learn from the beginning of implementing? Because I'm sure it has changed since the start.
Oh, very much. So yes, so I am a Tier 3 interventionist. And so I do have a curriculum that I follow. And I'm in the middle of a master's degree to become a CALT, which is a certified academic language therapist. So that is, and a master's in teaching and a dyslexia specialist. And so I have a very detailed language-rich curriculum that I use with my students. But when we were looking at the materials for Wit and Wisdom, and especially GEOs, I wanted to absolutely incorporate these materials into our work as well. I feel that to make sure that I know the context of what my students are learning in their classroom helps me facilitate that transition for students. And so, yes, we have our detailed work, but also I look at the 5 components of literacy. And so comprehension, absolutely, and discussion is paramount in vocabulary work. And so I wanted to make sure that the work that I'm doing helps my students transition to any content that they need from their classroom. Knowing the modules and knowing what is coming for the students in Wit and Wisdom helps me organize the context for my students. And so knowing the text, knowing their focusing question, the vocabulary, the end of module task, helps me in that moment be able to redirect my thinking and bring in ideas that the students bring up. And I talk to the kids all the time about strengthening that literacy pathway in their brain. And I want to be able to keep our work relevant and grounded in what they're doing in their classroom. And we were at the beginning of the year, I always like to provide a community building aspect to our work, and also to look at our goals. So I think it's important, for students to be able to make their own goals and to see where they are. And so part of that is there's a beautiful book by Jacqueline Woodson called The Day You Begin. And so we were writing about the day we begin in our literacy journey and in our instruction and outlining goals for ourselves. And as I was speaking with the 4th graders, and a student noticed that how the main character changed over the course of the book. And we could tie in how a challenging setting can make a person change, which goes beautifully along with what they were doing in Hatchet and their module in their classroom. And so there was another way of students being able to see, yes, we're doing this in Wit and Wisdom, but globally as a learner, these are concepts and ideas that I can take anywhere with me in my literacy journey.
And really in their life journey too, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, these are not, I'm learning these skills for school, so it goes along to that idea of I'm a thinker, I'm becoming a thinker. I can use this across multiple settings for many, many reasons. And so I like to make sure that, these ideas and concepts and modules can speak to each other for students.
And it reminds me of what Sue Pimentel said on one of our episodes, which is on a Post-it note on my wall, by the way. I wrote it when we went on there. But she talked about this, that's the reason students read, or that's the reason we all read, right? Is to learn things like that and to make those connections and to think deeply, not to check off skills and standards, right? But
absolutely.
That's what makes a real reader.
A real reader, a lifetime reader. And again, that's what I'm not going to go in and I can do these skills, but I'm a reader too. And that's what, helping students connect these two spaces, the intervention space or multiple spaces. And then really the goal, we want them to make sure that students can see themselves as those valuable members of a learning community, regardless of an intervention or support, but their voice and their construction of the ideas is so valuable and heard.
Yeah. I think too, that's what makes everybody not just a reader, but a learner. As you all were saying, that's what, it's what makes that critical thinking. It's what makes students be able to connect content. And, I think about the widespread excitement of apps where you're listening to audiobooks or, podcasts to consume content where that oral language is so important to your comprehension to build knowledge. Most likely you're going to listen to a podcast on a topic that you're interested in, such as this one or another one. And, I know that for example, if I'm watching a TV show or, and I'm interested in it, I'll see if there's a podcast about it. Usually there is. So it's that extension of building knowledge and then helping kids to see that same connection. How can we become critical thinkers of this knowledge, critical learners of the knowledge that we're gaining all over the place. I think that's incredible that you're taking that content and really looking to extend it and align with it, because it's only going to teach students that it's really important to think not just about what's in front of you, but like question it and be like, is there any other stuff on this topic? And what does that say? Does it align with what this said? Does it say anything different? Just to continue to grow their knowledge in that area that aligns with what they're learning in their core content so that they can build that vocabulary and sustain that fluency. So that's really important.
And that flexibility of mind. So in those multiple settings, where I have to admit, we were looking, when this last summer, we were reading Nancy Wexler's work and thinking about, and I read her book and I had to think to myself, knowledge building. What does that mean? And how do you help children build knowledge? Yeah. Just in that concept, I really had to grapple and think about that. And how can we set up, because it's not something that you want to spoon feed them, because that's not building it. And so, but how can you set up an opportunity, or how can you set up different scenarios, or how can you set up the areas in which students can start putting these ideas together and build it for themselves? And so it was a challenge to me, but I wanted to make sure, again, so that they see we're thinking about this concept in this area, and then I can be flexible and think about it in this area, or even math. And we'll talk about how some of these ideas involve our thinking in math. And so again, being flexible in your thinking and using your brain. And again, I talk to my kids about using your brain all day long in all these different settings. And so then now I finally kind of had that aha about building, again, still not have all the answers, but it just made more sense to me this way.
Yeah. I think that really speaks to the productive struggle too aspect. Like the building knowledge is helping students to engage in that productive struggle. I watched a really interesting TED Talk that a colleague recommended. It's called Productive Failure. And it's by Manu Kapoor. I'm not sure if I'm saying his name correctly, but he was just brilliant in the way that he said, he used to be a math teacher, and there's really two ways to teach: productive failure or direct instruction. And how would you want to learn, and how do most people learn best? And it is through that productive failure. And so by building knowledge, I think that we can help students feel more confident as they productively fail.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. No, I agree. I love that. I love that idea. And again, in our class, we talk about, I have this little quote about, if you're not making mistakes, then you're not doing anything. And so, but that's exactly true. But, but it's the idea that, making mistakes means I'm learning. And so sometimes, we'll get it. And sometimes that we'll need to have, I love that productive struggle, and makes teachers uncomfortable though. I think it's very difficult and challenging. And I think that's some of what we were speaking as a staff of, when is it just struggle as opposed to productive struggle? Yeah. And so that idea of having that finesse of those scaffolds, and when are we scaffolding too much, which we can be a little guilty of. But so then we're not really setting up a building part. We're just saying, oh, here it is. And because we don't like that uncomfortable feeling of students not knowing. But I think it's that mindset of, when did learning, kids don't find things that are, I think Tim Shanahan said this, but kids don't find things that are easy very fun. We think it is, but it's not for them. Yeah. And, that engaging piece, or even classroom management, comes from curiosity and being engaged and being challenged. And it's that sweet spot of knowing just enough productive struggle.
Sweet spot was exact words I had in my head. But we found that in Baltimore a lot too, right? I know that we actually talked a lot about that end of, not letting them struggle enough, right? Almost like our teachers care so much about our students that we don't want to see them in that place of struggling. But like you're saying, that's where the learning happens.
Absolutely. And really the respect as a student and as a learner, where we're not on purpose, but I think inadvertently, we've all been in that situation where you really don't want somebody to help you, because that translates as, I don't think that you can do this. Right. And when we allow them, and it's like, I know it, yes, I agree. This is very challenging. And I know that you can do this. And here are the pieces that we have for you, that we can provide for you, but you have this and you can do this.
Yeah. I'm curious if you have any student stories from your classroom that support productive struggle, because I think it's really interesting that you are servicing, students who may have disabilities and who you need to, who have typically in the past have received probably more scaffolds than not. And so I'm curious if you have any stories or any little snippets of information that might be interesting to our listeners in the ways that your students have interacted with wit and wisdom texts or tasks or topics that have kind of flipped the switch on that narrative.
Oh my gosh, so many stories. And I've been implementing, so I use the ideas and and I bring in some of the text from Wit and Wisdom, but a lot of the work I've been doing is sort of experimenting and beta testing with geodes. And so I have several of geode stories that speak to that. And one of the stories that comes to mind, one of the first books that we started reading was Library Cat. And I don't know if you're familiar with the text. And I love this little book. And we've all
It's a beautiful book.
It's a beautiful book. It really is. And
I don't even know if our listeners can Google it, because I think that I'm going to Google it and see. I don't think you can, because I think it's owned by Grapevine.
And it's a CBC book, so it's we've all had those short bowel books, and there's often a cat, and somebody inevitably is going to take a nap at some point, and there's a mat, and we all had this
and they're chasing a rat, yeah,
of course they're chasing that rat, and yet this is. The brilliance of this book is that it was set in Alexandria, and so in Egypt, and Anat is the cat, and he is a guardian of books, and so, or that we, discovered scrolls. And come on, how exciting is this book? And we read this for 2 weeks. I had other texts come up, but I could not put this aside, and the students were so excited. And I have to say that I even had to change my lesson plan. The books were out, and I was going to do this introduction, and I had it all worked out, and the students came in, and this little group is a group of students that struggle emotionally also with learning, that challenges can be overwhelming. And so I was thoughtful about the introduction and how to go about introducing the text in our lesson. And I came in, saw the book, and started reading immediately. Okay, that wasn't my plan, but I am not the person to ever take a book out of a child's hand. Right. And so they started diving in, and because of the access point, because of the structure of the text, the students could engage immediately. And so, flexibility rearranged the entire lesson plan. And they were so engaged and so excited about the accessibility. But then when I put up a picture of Alexandria, what the library had looked like, and or an artist rendition, and we could start thinking about, again, you're noticing and wondering and sort of having a conversation, it erupted into a very passionate discussion about the columns in the picture and the columns in the text. And by this point, the text had been put away, and we were looking at the image, at the picture, and having this discussion. And so again, a very heated discussion, and we went back to our habits of discussion, and I respectfully disagree. And so, being able to have a forum to use those words, those students had not had, at least in my setting, were not interested or had any kind of purpose of using those sentence stems of I respectfully disagree, and here's what I want to say. And so using that language and having a purpose to use that language because they had something to say, but they really did need to wait for that other person to talk. And so it was this authentic discovery and using that. And at one point, one of my students stood up, where is the book? I have to show you. I have to tell you, I want to show you my idea, and being so excited and using that evidence to support her claim. And I just got goosebumps because of the deep discussion and where the students had taken themselves with this text. And it was absolutely their own, that struggle of wanting to get to that next point of wanting to be able to have this discussion with this person, and using the conventions that, we had suggested to use to have a civil discussion, and being able to use those stems. It really was rewarding.
Yeah. Do you want to quickly share what geodes are, in case anybody who's listening is like, what's a geode? It's a rock. And they're talking about it like it's a book.
Sorry, context, yes.
Building content knowledge.
That's right. So as part of Wit and Wisdom, which we are implementing this year, we had learned about Wit and Wisdom and knew about Wit and Wisdom from before, and we're so delighted and thankful to our district being able to offer this opportunity for us. So we were so excited. And then I had not heard of geodes before, but geodes is a supplementary small group instruction text for K2 that goes along with his written, was written in accordance or in conjunction with Wilson, so Foundations phonics. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm not saying this correctly, but they are a collaboration between Foundations and Wilson, and looking at books that were decodable, but still fascinating and wonderful and beautiful to read. Mm-hmm. And I think it was brilliant. So Lorraine Griffith and Emily Gula, masterminds this upset, I think, in the trade of decodables. And it is truly magical. I've never seen anything like it. And kids clamoring to read the books, but still keeping true to decodability. Mm-hmm. And being able to practice.
They really are
skills.
Readable texts.
Absolutely.
That are accessible. And I will throw a plug in. I've been begging them to to create them for grade 3, because when I shared with Presley last year that there were no more books, she was like, where's the grade 3 books? I mean, I feel like every child is a super fan of geodes. If you put geodes in a kid's hand, it's the content that they can read at their, at that decodable level, but with the content knowledge that they've gained from their core instruction. So it is beyond exciting that they're really fluently reading these incredible stories, these incredible books about the content that they're learning in their core curriculum, core class in Wit and Wisdom. She was devastated. Like she goes, well, she said, can you just call Miss Lorraine and ask her if she could make more? And I was like, I don't think it's that easy, but put a plug in, write her a card.
And it does follow the modules. And so for K, it follows modules, but it's not limited to the modules. And so for my 3rd and 4th graders as well. And so you can, and I applaud and absolutely support the 3rd grade as well. But you can use them for multiple purposes and because Wit and Wisdom spirals and, you have different things coming at different grades, it can preload or support in a couple different ways. And I've had opportunity where I can make these connections based on what they're doing. Again, not maybe speaking directly to, but still making the connections. And literally, I have students clamoring at my door. I have an after-school club for homework for a portion of my students, and they were at the door, where are my books? And coming in right at 3:00, wanting to read their books and bringing themselves in. And we had jumping the schedule just a little bit again, but making themselves, so they grabbed their books on this topic that we were reading and formed a little reading group in the back. And truly, I was not a part. They were on their own making this group. And it truly speaks to the quality of the text.
Yeah.
That's awesome. By the way, I found Library Cat online.
Oh.
And it's posted by Great Minds, so I think it's like copyright okay.
Good sleuthing, Melissa. Okay.
No problem.
Good. Will you send it to me so I can include it in the notes?
Of course I will.
Okay. And I'll check with Great Minds too that it's A-okay.
Just make sure.
We'll make sure it's on the up and up and we're not in any copyright violation.
Rachel, I'm wondering about, as you talked, I was thinking like, well, what did they have before geodes and Wit and Wisdom? And what did that look like? And I'm just curious, like, what was the the journey like for your teachers transition? Well, tell us about what was going on before, and then what was the transition like into Wit and Wisdom and Geodes?
Yeah. So we have back in 2016, we were afforded a ELG literacy grant, which began this journey of science-based instruction and science of reading for us. And we were it's sort of a two-phase process where, the first phase we were brought into this a little bit abruptly and harsh reality of that everything that you had been doing prior to now is really not research based. And personally, I had been reading recovery, and I was an LLI interventionist, and could take a running record on a cocktail nap and not needed. And so this was my go-to. This is what I did. And so a first year of implementation of looking at all of this information, it was like a Band-Aid. It was very, very startling and abrupt. And we had a lot of wonderful PD, including letters, which I could do letters all day long. But it didn't speak to the core curriculum that we had at the time. And so teachers and myself were left wondering all of this wonderful PD, but again, going back to what am I supposed to be doing on a day-to-day basis that matches this professional development? And do I put a vowel circle on my wall? Is that how I'm supposed to support that? And so it was unclear. The path and the journey was unclear to us. And so there was no clear avenue for success. Teachers really didn't know what success should look like. And it reminds me of an amazing article, Lost in Translation by Mark Seidenberg, where he addresses the challenges of connecting the reading of science and the educational practice. And this was so true. And teachers want to have this research. And but where's the vehicle for that implementation? Where's the science of instruction that can match what we're learning? And so that was a huge disconnect for us. And I remember one moment so vividly, the first Tom, Truth Bomb Shanahan article that I'd ever read, or our staff ever read. And, he has that style of just unsentimental and perfectly honest. And, I remember thinking, I don't know if I care for your tone. It was just so, unapologetic.
Probably because you were so jarred by which I mean is natural if it's contrary to everything that you've learned in the past.
Oh, absolutely. Exactly. Is the earth still round? It was so
yes, exactly.
startling to us. And really, people were in tears. And this was an article telling us that leveled readers, that's not supported by research, and everything, again, that we had sort of based our literacy instruction on really wasn't supported by research. And so it was very shocking. We had staff members crying and walking out and being personally offended. And I think as an interventionist, interventionists are kind of scrappy, where we can hold to things that are seemingly opposing in your brain. And so I said, I was LLI, but I'd also been trained in Lindemann Bell. And that made perfect sense to me. You had to have that phonics instruction. And so I'd always augmented anyway. And I started, when I first started graduate school, I thought I'd be a school psychologist. So I started with brain-based education and cognitive theories. And yes, we should have this for pre-service teachers. And I can do another whole hour on what I think about pre-service teachers, which I will spare you from.
Well, we actually just podcasted with, yeah.
Did you? Because, oh my gosh, it is such,
we haven't released it yet. Right, Melissa? We didn't release it?
Not yet.
No.
Yes.
So maybe by the time we release this podcast, that one will have been released. Yep. So we did podcast with a professor of the program at Cincinnati. It's Melissa.
Mount St. Joseph.
Thank you. I was like, Cincinnati, St. Joseph, Mount St. Joseph. And it's exactly that. I mean, she's preparing both pre-service and graduate students, but their pre-service kind of erupted from their graduate program. Mm-hmm. And it's incredible that every college is not doing what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So go ahead. Sorry, I interrupted. But
No.
I was excited.
Oh my gosh.
Soon.
No, it's educational, fraud. It's what colleges are doing to young teachers is criminal, in my opinion. It is just, they are not preparing them. It is so antiquated. And I have to agree. Teachers were not supported in that process of that shift. And so it was a personal attack rather than instructional, because there was, in that first year, there was just no support and no respect about, this is what you've been doing this whole time. And come to find out, there's a huge amount of research that does not support it. And so the tenets of science-based reading did not land well that first year, I have to say. And so we did have a new core curriculum, but everything else was sort of floundering. And what happened the second year was a huge game changer, where we had new administration. And so Jenny and Matt, who are principal and vice principal, who are currently our principal and vice principal at Clayton now, just amazing difference between what they were able to bring, and most importantly, clarity of what we were going to do. And we still had the core curriculum that we had, but Jenny specifically she'd been a teacher and an interventionist and had personally traveled this road and was sensitive to the vulnerability, feeling so out of control with all these methodologies and all the research. And basically, how do I judge teaching anymore? If you're telling me these things don't work for me anymore, why do I base this off of? What is my gut supposed to tell me? And we were in a very, very vulnerable place. And so we were still making sense of Tier 1 with this new core curriculum that wasn't wit and wisdom. Yet we were reimagining our intervention block. So at Clayton, we are very fortunate in that we do have a Tier 1 structured literacy, but we also have an intervention block where this is the beginning of its birth and creation, where every student K3 and as needed for 4-6, we have data teams, and then we are able to organize and place every single student in the appropriate area of instruction. And I hesitate to say level, so it's skill. It's what they need at that moment, and then we progress monitor and they go to that next level. And we didn't want kids floundering in groups for the entire year, and so that you have these kids year after year that all they see is CVC, because you're not on that cutting edge of what they need next. So we reimagined this flooding block. But what we were able to do was that explicit instruction, but Jenny brought materials that made sense. So 95% group, what we use for that instruction, we still do. And it was aligned to what we were learning. This was explicit. This was systematic. This was based in research, and it was exactly aligned to what we were learning. So it made sense.
Can I just ask you one question really quickly?
Yeah.
So only because I feel like I want to clarify for those listening. So you are, you have a Tier 1 core curricula, but are fine-tuning your intervention block right now.
Well, this was in the past. And so that's what, because Melissa had asked me kind of where we had come from.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So in the course of the story, so the skill that you're talking about is they're foundational skills.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I just want to clarify.
Yes. Yeah. No, sorry. No, there's a lot going on. And again, it was that at first we had the intervention block, and then we were able to have structured literacy on a classroom as well. So that's Tier 1 structured literacy. But then as an intervention, so some kids might be beyond that. And so if they need something that's a little bit more rigorous or a little bit along that scope and sequence that's a little bit beyond the classroom, they were able to have that. And students that need that another dip or that remediation, they are able to have that as well to build up to what's that precursor skill. So you were able to do both of those. Yes.
Got it. Okay.
You.
So you use that foundational skill scope and sequence to really support and extend for students.
Yes. And so, and Jenny, and she brought that with with her. And so she had the knowledge, she had the understanding, she had the empathy. She knew that where teachers were and knew that we needed these high quality materials and enough for everyone. Not here's one box, everybody make copies for 5 teachers. We've all done that. And please have fidelity. And so it makes it really challenging, but there were enough materials. There was enough time.
Can I also just say, we just talked about productive struggle, 10 minutes ago in this conversation, that we were like, productive struggle, not direct instruction. So there is a time and a place for direct instruction, and it is proven that direct instruction should happen in that foundational skills block, because we should not let students just construct what they think words mean or letters sound like.
Absolutely. And again, it goes back to purpose. I think
it's not productive.
But I think that's a really good point, Laura, because I think it's purpose. And I think that what happens sometimes is people want to put on these philosophies as this is the philosophy for everything that you're doing. And that's not true. You don't teach comprehension the same way that you would teach phonics, the way that you would teach fluency. Right. And so it's not, you're going to have productive struggle in one area, but then you wouldn't have, let's say, explicit systematic in another area. It depends on what you're trying to do in that purpose. And so I get really confused why people have such dogmatic views about a one size fits all in everything that we're doing. Yet, because it's not that. It's about that what's best instruction, and it can look different for the purpose that you're trying to the purposes of your students. So
it's almost like what you just called out was like those 5 pillars of literacy, right? Those pillars and the way that you teach them each with a different purpose. So like the phonemic awareness and phonics pillars are direct. The purpose is to connect, sounds and letters and teach students how to read words.
Yeah, and we don't want struggling, and we don't want guessing, and we don't want any of that. And so absolutely. And so you wouldn't put that together. So that is systematic. That is, and that's you're practicing with decodable text. You're making, you have that incremental systematic direct instruction. Absolutely. Yep. And it is, and again, I didn't want to say level, but it is a skill base. And so this is the pattern that we're looking at right now, and that we are going to look at that and go to that next step and bring in that next pattern. And so looking at different syllables and syllable types and how that works together, or we wouldn't necessarily want students to be in that multisyllable when they're just putting their letters and sounds together. So that there is a different scope and sequence there.
Yes. That's so helpful. Thank you for that.
No, I love that point. And I think it's very true. And so again, making sure that we were correct in our instruction as well, and having the time and the block for that. And so that's what we were looking at. And so when Jenny was bringing this to us that second year, it was led with such respect and empathy for where we were as learners and teachers, that we were able to access what that change, what that shift, what that switch is going to be. And I think going through, we're looking at our geodes instruction now, and this is what we had. And then what we're going to is, going to wit and wisdom and going to geodes and thinking through about that teacher buy-in, right? So that we want to make sure that what we're setting up is a system or a way that teachers can know that they're successful with their students, that efficacy, they can see that success. And we were able to implement that through being able to see the results of where the kids were growing, and teachers saw that direct impact of their instruction and that buy-in. And so going forward, that's what we want to do with geodes as well, where we're putting in that first year of wit and wisdom. But with this amazing resource, we want to make sure that we have this dedicated professional development to really think through how we want to use this resource.
And what you just said at the end there, I'm like, I want to dig into that more, but I want to talk about how you're using geodes, like the nitty gritty, right? Like, how are you breaking kids up? What does your block look like? But I also want to throw out there, because I'm interested to hear what you both think about this. I feel like you almost all did it backwards. Like most places, and not in a bad way,
No.
You did your intervention block first. Like it was almost like you were like, let's solidify intervention first, or you did your foundational skills block first?
Yes and no. So we did have a core curriculum that came, again, that sort of the first abrupt year, there was no training. It was boxes and boxes and boxes and boxes of materials without a way of using any of the materials. And so,
which we know doesn't work, because we've talked to Rivet. They are
it
heavy
work.
into PL. That is not going to work.
It's not going to work. And they were just tons of materials. And so we knew that tier 1 instruction is the most important instruction. So, but we are looking at how to best utilize that. And so that was in process. And so, but when we started looking at the intervention block, I wouldn't say that one was first, or it was in tandem. And so that intervention block, it wasn't that it was in place of, because we're still very, very much looking at that tier 1, and is essential. And we've done a lot of work in terms of learning communities and learning groups, and putting all those pieces into place, and knowing that we needed to make sure that was firm, that was quality instruction always. And so what the difference with the intervention block, because the materials spoke so perfectly to the work that we were doing. And so that was a perfect alignment, where the core curriculum still needed a lot of work in terms of how are we going to best utilize these materials for what we wanted to do. So it was a work in progress.
Then you transitioned to Wit and Wisdom. And
yes.
And then then you could see the pieces really just fit together of the puzzle. And then when you planned for using geodes, like I know that there are, recommended teacher plans or suggested plans. But I feel like you did something a little bit special and unique with your teachers, which was just, give them that science of reading knowledge. And then you gave them a little bit of flexibility. Like it was, hey, let's, just try these out, see what happens. I'm curious to hear what happened.
Well, so, and again, the load of this year was significant. I mean, it's been just a very challenging year across the nation, across the world, globally. And so looking at, we had a new core curriculum, we have a new writing program, there was a lot of new, and we are continuing our growth and going deeper in terms of the developmental pathways of how students learn to read. We are digging deeper into how students construct knowledge. And so there's a lot of thought around continuing our PD and continuing our growth in terms of science and reading, and utilizing that full rope, where we had centered a lot of our work on that lower word portion. And we were blowing out and really analyzing what we want to do with that top portion. What does that look like? And how are we going to utilize Wit and Wisdom? How are we going to utilize geodes? How do we take what we've been doing well? What do we need to revise? And where do we need to go forward in that work? So looking at all of those components. And so because of all of that, and we didn't want to make the mistakes of the past, and where we're just like thrown in and we're throwing teachers into this pot and good luck with everything. Making sure that we are very thoughtful in terms of how we are going to organize and orchestrate the use of geodes.
Yeah.
So it was
Can I actually just jump in and say really quickly, I love how you talked about the rope, and I want to say that that Wit and Wisdom is that like blue part, right? The knowledge building. So the quote top part, and then the foundational skills that you mentioned, that like the foundations are the bottom part. Geodes really sit like straddling those
It connects
colors. It's like purple, right? If there was a purple,
exactly.
geodes would be written in purple in the middle of the rope. It connects. So just to kind of like conceptualize that for folks who are listening, geodes is that connector thread, that bridge, that piece that is purple because the blue and the red are making purple. And
And I know like David Lieben talks about that all the time. I just call him David, like he's my best friend.
Yeah, he's your buddy.
Dave.
But he always says like geodes are really special for that reason, that there are not a lot of products out there that really do connect the two parts of the rope like that.
Yeah.
And I agree. It really is that utilization and what Wit and Wisdom calls, the skills and service of knowledge building. And I think that's where the rubber hits the road with that, where they are utilizing and practicing the skills, building their own knowledge. And so I agree. I think it's right in that, again, that sweet spot of having the all aspects of the rope come together for students and being those readers.
Yeah. So tell us about what did you do to help teachers?
Yes. So we didn't want to just, the blessing and the curse of geodes as well is the flexibility and the planning. Mm-hmm. And so we didn't want to throw this huge question for teachers to figure out. So we pulled back, and the initial PD was around our why, and knowing the work that we had already done with science of reading in our history, and we had moved away from level text, and we had moved away from queuing systems or anything like that. And so making sure to bring in our research of the why and what it is. So we were explicit in terms of how they were organized, the number of books. One book, one level for the whole classroom. And so that was
grade level.
The grade level, like this is it. There's one text. Even though we've gone away from leveled reading, that's still new learning. That's still, a challenge, I think, for teachers sometimes to conceptualize about, everybody and what are we going to do? And so bringing up these questions. Yeah. And then it was for the rest of the year until really this year is exploration. Look at them. And there was no expectation of implementation. Use them, read them, don't use them, unpack them, look at your teacher's guide, and really get to know what it is that this resource has and bring all your questions. We wanted to make sure to be thoughtful in terms of appreciating the teacher's time and being able to have enough background so they knew what they were, and then we can go forward into next year and how we want to implement them. And so we're looking at right now, we're still in the mix of it. We're still in the mess of asking questions, truly of asking questions and figuring out not only geodes, but small group instruction in general. So what place does that have with Wit and Wisdom? Because of all the access points with what Wit and Wisdom does. So what are you doing
in small group?
What are we doing in small group?
Yeah. I want to make sure we're clarifying. So those who are listening, a Wit and Wisdom lesson, if you're like, what? How long is a Wit and Wisdom lesson? It's 90 minutes. So then that would leave some time in the literacy block for small groups. In the primary grades, you would also have that foundations 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. Is that accurate? So you're having a 30-minute foundations block, a 90-minute Wit and Wisdom block, and then an additional small group piece that you're talking about. How do you have a time frame on that, or right?
We
is
don't.
it crazy because of COVID right now?
Right now, we haven't. Yeah, exactly. So the time's right now because how long are we all spending washing our hands? And so right now it's not, what health and safety first, and then we'll put everything else in. So we don't have all those specific times at this time. But we wanted to be careful and again, this is the time we have this new. We've been wanting to redesign and think through small group instruction for forever, because you have the kids at your kitchen table, then all the time that the kids are on their own, what is going on there? And so we don't want, babysitting time or just activities that fill that space till they're with you. But we want to make sure that that's building quality instruction the entire time. And again, Tim Shanahan had the article about that quality instruction and building knowledge the entire time of small group. And we wanted to make sure to match that. And so thinking through that entire structure. And And so asking the question, if we are looking at the developmental stages of reading from pre-alphabetic all the way to consolidated, how are we going to use that information? How are we going to use what we know about the kids in terms of their brain functioning, really bringing in that science and basing all of our decisions on the science and what the kids are doing? We know that the predictors are, we need that strong alphabetic and phonological those skills. If we want orthographic mapping, we'll need that vocabulary. We'll need that semantic knowledge. We will need all of these components to have those fluent readers. And how are we going to organize all of this? So it's a big question. And like I said, we are asking a lot of questions. And we are still in that process of going through the research. What does the pacing look like for K1? Because there's some questions about, we're looking at David Kilpatrick's work, and as first graders starting, developmentally, it doesn't always match where Dibble starts. And so, looking at that pacing and the skills and where are we going and how fast should we go with readers and how, what is the development telling us? And so asking those questions again. And we wanted to make sure that the role of small group was based on these quality questions and the science of the development of the reading brain.
Yeah. So thoughtful. Incredibly thoughtful.
Well, the research, our students deserve it. The researchers deserve it. We are in this place where we're putting this together. We worked a long time and we're being able to put this together. And now Wit and Wisdom provides so much for us. And how can we shore up some of these other areas? And so we're asking those questions. But I really believe, again, and speaking with Lorraine and Emily, thinking through, I think I was getting a little seduced in geodes by the knowledge building component, where I wanted it to match Wit and Wisdom one more time. And I had to be a little bit careful, because really it's that practice. This is the application. It's the student's turn to read. And so thinking through the purpose of small group instruction, do we need it? Absolutely. These are books in hands, eyes on text. This is the students grappling with these ideas. And if we don't provide that time, especially in K1, so much of it is read aloud, which is amazing. We know we need that listening comprehension for great reading and speaking and writing. But we do need that small group instruction. We need kids to have those books in their hands to be able to put all of that together and to apply those phonics. It really is the application of the skills that they're learning. So I had to really, and I'm such a phonics person, to keep the phonics in mind. And so it really, but you get a little seduced by the discussions. But we want to make sure that, that we are looking at the 3 hurdles. And so Emily, and again, Lloyd, spoke about these 3 hurdles that Geodes was framed around. And so accuracy, phrasing, and expression. And so what are the supports that we need to put in? Where are your students? And again, keeping the, and so my challenge, or our challenge, is, okay, so if I'm using those 4 stages, how am I going to organize students in terms of accuracy, phrasing, and expression? You taking where they are in their journey, and then making these groups accordingly. And
you're doing flexibly, right?
Absolutely, and flexibly. So it is a lot of work to sort of organize it. But again, I think that's where that true reading success for students is going to come from, our work and putting those things together. But then they will be able to utilize these wonderful texts in the best way possible.
Yeah,
so
that's
good.
Amazing. And it just makes so much sense that you all are doing productive struggle right now, right? As teachers. And that's how you're going to get to find what works for your students. I think sometimes people want the people who make whatever the product is to tell us how to do it perfectly.
Right.
And right. There's not a one way that looks the right way for everybody. So you all are doing the hard work right now that's going to get you there.
Well, and it's that, and again, looking at the teacher's edition, it's the blessing of the curse. It's very flexibly written, but it's because, and it takes planning, it takes thought, and it takes planning. And where is this group of students? Where is this one student? And what is the minimal support that I can give you to and give you the maximum gain, where that you are struggling and you are grappling with this text, and then being able to put these ideas together. But I've done like I said, I've done beta testing with my kids and my groups, and I have to say, some of the outcomes I could not have planned better. The kids were able to put this information together and came up with ideas and thoughts and practice that, again, I could not have ever planned for in a way. And so there's one of the books, it's called The Story in the Cave. And I don't know if you've had a chance to read it. And it's about 4 teenagers, and it's a true story about 4 teenagers finding a cave in France. And so I wanted to structure this small group with the intention of utilizing the entry point of phonics and being able to transfer and practice. And so this is my attempt to sort of, okay, if we want to put all these ideas together for teachers and be able to discuss this as teachers, I wanted to construct this for myself and see, okay, how would this feel? What are the questions I need to be asking of our team? And so I started to put this together, and I wanted to utilize that entry point. We were looking at digraph TH, and so voiced and unvoiced. And so we looked at that. And so again, that skills and service of knowledge, but also I was looking at some of their language goals from their IEP and developmental stage from where I knew my students, and incorporating these objectives. And so I had syntax in oral and written language and extension of vocabulary, and again, that phonics goal. And so this was a great text for us. It is a 3rd grade group. Even though it didn't match their module, which was immigration, but it did provide us with a great jumping off point for front loading, because their module 4, they're going to go into art and the artist. And so it's a great way to sort of start front loading some of these ideas for the students. And
I'm happy to hear you say that, because I feel like, and Melissa and I have talked about this a bit, I feel like sometimes teachers, just people in general, get caught up in, well, we're learning about this, so I also then have to align everything across the board to learn about that. But that is so the opposite of how things work in life. Like, it's not like I've learned, for example, my husband and I are watching shows and listening to podcasts and reading books on Scientology, but we did not get all of our, just because it's like an obsessive topic to learn about, but we didn't get all of our knowledge about Scientology at this moment as a 39-year-old, as a 40-year-old, everything we've, gotten in the past 3 weeks of being like, wow, this is a crazy topic. We should learn more about it. There was, you read a little article here, you see a little tweet there, you watch a documentary a couple years ago that kind of sparks your interest. And then, something brings you back to that as you're on, a streaming service, and you're like, we should check this out. It's so the opposite. I mean, and that was a silly example, right? But it's so the opposite of how life works, especially for kids.
Oh, absolutely. And then you put these snippets of information together, and your brain, you're organizing, you have your little semantic map in your brain, you're organizing these things together, and you're bringing in all those different aspects that are, congealing. And then students are then say, how does this support or extend what I already know about this topic? And so some of these questions that we would kind of artificially put in for students, they're organically asking themselves, because we're having these different ideas come from different areas. And so just as a part of the thinking brain, they're going to ask themselves, well, I thought you said here, but what about this? And what about this? And so then they're able to sort of ask those questions for themselves.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so it doesn't always have to speak to the module by module, that specifically. And so, but we can start talking about some of the ideas and some of the concepts that they're going to be introduced to. And I reached out to the art teacher. And so we were looking at this book is about cave drawings. And so we pre-planned and started talking about some of the things that she might be doing so that I knew where the kids were going to be going with this. And so I began to roll this out and thinking about if I were a classroom teacher, because essentially I have small groups. These are my small groups. And if I were a classroom teacher, and I don't necessarily have other students at the same time to have to juggle both of them, but I could see what that would, I could see how I could start to present my lesson in a way that to build what were the students be doing with or with me and when we're working independently. And so I organized my lesson in such a way where to build in that component, because that was the other big question for us is what are students doing when they're not with you directly? And right. So I began the introduction and we had our video and we had our notice and wonder of the cave drawings and we started to chart out our questions. And again, this was full class. Again, we would have one book that everybody was going to use. So I can start talking about the vocabulary with everyone to save that time in your small group. And I can introduce everything. And I'm using the structures of notice and wonder, and the kids are familiar with it. And I'm charting out our questions for our wonder, which will be a component for our work later on independently. So then you can organize how you'd want to read the text. And we are practicing, like I said, our voiced and unvoiced TH digraph. And so when it came time to work independently, I had each student choose one of the questions, whether it was their own or somebody else's, choose one of the questions from our notice and wonder and put it on a huge poster. Everybody had their own poster and they could research from the book that we had read several times and for different purposes. And I had a vocabulary routine and several different times of reading the text. And then they had the video that I had chosen available, a YouTube video. And then I also, in the books are these wonderful more sections. So if you're not familiar with geodes, at the end, they always have a more section that gives you more information about the topic. And so I tape recorded that and I pushed that out to students on Google Classroom.
They could listen, yeah.
So they could listen to it.
And the more section is like, it's at a higher level. It's about a 5th grade reading level.
Yes. So. And so some students could read it, but not everyone, so that you could have that into their poster as they answered their question. They could use drawings, they could use text, they could use labels, and then we would organize it into practicing complete sentences, because we are also looking at, we use the writing revelation. So using at fragments and complete sentences. So we were doing that in speech and in our writing. And so then I would pull individual kids to progress monitor and read independently and watch how engaging, what were the students doing? Would this be something that, let's say, a classroom could do independently? And they were so engaged. They were so involved and invested in the question that they had chosen, that they were accessing, it wasn't a quiet necessarily classroom, but it was a very productive classroom. I could see a structure like that where you would still be extending that knowledge, having them use the writing, and it was all still beneficial in every aspect. And I have to say, one of the most amazing comments I think I've ever heard a student say. So we were going back, and again, you want to be able to be clever enough or to be thoughtful enough to plan something like this, and I was not. My student was so thoughtful, and she had said, I noticed when we were first doing and then we were presenting our posters, and she said, I noticed the explorers were kids like us, and this changed my perspective of what an explorer can be. And this was a comment from a student, and it just blew me away. And, in habits of discussion, and you're supposed to be sort of refined and not support one side or another. And I did not have a very,
you lost your poker face.
I kind of lost my poker face there, and I'm not great at it anyway, but I was so enthralled. I said, please tell me more. And so we went back to having this discussion because I knew as third graders, they had investigated Jakusko and they had gone through all the astronauts, and they had looked at in Galileo. And so we thought about, and we had this great discussion about comparing what this student had meant by kids like us and changing what perspectives that could be as an explorer, a scientist, and then looking at the scientists and having this amazing conversation. And again, I could not have planned anything more thoughtful for these students, and it was based on this text that That's is amazing. Quality and engenders that those thoughts for students.
I'm hearing you say to everybody, reimagine small group.
Yes, it's absolutely
reimagine it.
Absolutely.
Well, Melissa, is it time?
It's time, which I think is a good transition. So, we always ask Rachel for our guests to leave us with a piece of advice, which you literally just told us one, but we're going to ask for another one.
And it could be that. You can just repeat what I just said.
So
if you have any advice for our listeners from your experience, we'd love to hear it.
Well, I have you seen your guest list? I am not advice. I cannot.
Oh, absolutely you are.
No,
you're the most important advice because you're doing it every day.
That's exactly right.
I would do, if I could change it to advocacy, I will. And so I'd like to advocate for students. However, and I want to, for myself, this comes from myself, but to be careful about assumptions. And I think as we, look at the students, and we have the future in our classrooms right now, and assumptions that we make about ability and interest and background and what we think will be boring and not boring and their capacity, I think just being a little bit careful about narrowing that lens for students. And we are the filter. We highlight or we dismiss things that the students see, and to making sure that our lens and our filter is wide enough for them and students to have their voice. And I don't know if I have time, but I want to add just one more story from a student. This was from when we were remote. They were looking at this is when they're deep into Galileo, and I made a Nearpod just to help support some of the huge ideas that were coming down for students, the study of Galileo. And so we'd walk through everything, and we got into the Spanish Inquisition. Describing Spanish Inquisition to third graders. Okay,
Presley is there right now, so I will come back to you and let you know about how Presley reacts to it, because she's about to dive into the Spanish.
Well, okay, Laura, this conversation. So I get to a question. I said, okay, so why would people be so upset about what Galileo was saying? And I had a student say, well, because he was a thief. And I had to sit for a second, and my favorite words when I don't understand, could you tell me more about that? Because I could not make that connection. And he said, well, when he came to the spyglass, it really wasn't his idea. And that's true. And when he came to, and he modified. And so then he said, and then when he was talking about the earth or the sun being the center, that wasn't his idea either. That was Copernicus. And he added on, but that wasn't his idea. So when the guys, he got the guys at the Spanish Inquisition, he got grounded. He was grounded. At the house arrest, he was grounded because he was stealing ideas. And so we kind of walked back through that, and I thought, well, look at what he's putting together. Look at the ideas that he's putting together. And so that focusing question about what tools scientists use, instead of dismissing or instead of thinking, well, it's this narrow thought, he was putting so much into that. We were able to expand. Well, the tools that scientists use are thoughts from other scientists. And so we hadn't thought of that, but because of how this student, what he brought to that discussion, instead of making an assumption about what he was saying, opening that lens up for him to have an authentic voice. And I learned so much every day from my students. And I'm so glad that they don't have those student responses that are in little boxes, because it's going to be messy and strange. But it's so amazing how they're putting this information together.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for being here today. We
so
really appreciate it.
I appreciate you asking teachers that are working every day. And I know I veered off.
No, it's great.
No, you did an amazing job. Thank you.
Literacy is complicated. We are not math. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
I absolutely appreciate the opportunity.
Oh my gosh, of course. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks so much.